We inherit covenant before we create covenant. I find the words of Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker gently stay with me these days as a reminder of things we inherit and the legacies we leave behind. The English etymology, or the origin of the word covenant, dates back to the 13th century. In Old French, it meant mutual compact, to do or not to do something, a contract, or agreement, pact, promise, and in Old Latin it meant come together, unite, be suitable, agree. Of course, before this was the etymology of the word covenant, in English it already existed in Hebrew and in Arabic and older languages like Chinese, where the roots of the meaning of the word also touch on it being an agreement, making a treaty or a promise to one another. Humans have been entering into covenants or agreements for thousands of years. It's what allows us to trust each other and go deeper in our relationships. As we reflect on the questions, what have we been given? What is the covenant we are already in? Another story comes to mind for me. Now, I shared this story with you last time I preached in the pulpit back in November of 2018, a long time ago. My family of 5 migrated to the US in 1998. 10 years later, after helping with a family business while going to high school and college, as did my brothers, we found out only 4 of us were given our citizenships. I shared back in 2018, my middle brother was all of a sudden undocumented, given around 60 days to move out of the country. But he had decided to stay in this country as he finished his undergraduate degree. And a few months later, after deciding to stay, he was pulled over while driving and arrested for being undocumented. When my brother was arrested as an undocumented person, he was transferred to a detention center in Youngstown, Ohio, many miles away from us and without us knowing where he was, for 2 weeks. When we were able to find out where he was placed, we began to plan regular road trips to Youngstown, Ohio, going back and forth between Virginia Beach and DC as often as we could, all the way to Ohio. A part of this story I didn't share with you is an experience I consider to be a powerful spiritual lesson. On one of our planned trips, my parents and I entered the detention center where my brother was being held. The correctional guards who had normally let my mother into the center wearing open-toed shoes had changed their policies without notification, so she wasn't allowed to go in wearing sandals. On that day, my panicked mother got into our car and immediately drove out of the detention center. She needed closed-toed shoes. But there were no stores to be found. She decided to stop at a gas station where she saw a bunch of people sitting in front of the entrance while I stayed in the car. She explained the situation, and the people began to help by Googling where she could buy shoes nearby. And then all of a sudden, joining the attempts of others, this tall Black woman stood up, looked down at her shoes, and in a prophetic spirit, took them off. She nudged them over to my mom, and then my mom took her shoes off and nudged them over to her. Mom then walked back to the car in the shoes of this stranger, half a size too big for her, held onto the steering wheel with trembling hands, and drove back to the detention center to be let in. Reflecting On Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker's words, we inherit covenant before we create covenant. And her question, what have we been given? I can't help but think this stranger we met in Ohio moved into action beholding an unspoken covenant that I only hope all of us could live up to when someone in need approaches us. This stranger didn't know our politics. She didn't know what religion we practiced, or if we believed anything at all. She didn't ask for anything in return. She simply acted on a covenant she had inherited and invited us into it. A covenant that was full of grace, trust, and understanding. A covenant that held our fears, our brokenness, our tears, and our hopelessness. A covenant that was grounded in transformational love. Who wouldn't want to exist in a world where such a covenant binds us all? This was one of the many covenants I have inherited in my life before creating covenants with new communities and people I've met since then. As you reflect on this story, please join me right now for a brief moment of musical reflection with a slideshow, and then I'll be back to share more with you. The conversation around covenant making can be playful, tense, messy, joyful, complicated, and all of those things are normal. But I find people get stuck on making it perfect or create a covenant where people have to live up to this ideal of perfectionism. And that is not what this is about. It's not about wordsmithing, it's about the deeper promise you are committed to and that you want to commit to hold yourselves to when it gets hard. It's about cultivating relationships, deepening the relationships you have here today and outside of this virtual space and this sanctuary. We're not perfect people. We all have scars that we carry. We carry joys too, but at the same time, intersecting with that joy can be sorrow, fear, shame, brokenness. A covenant needs to hold all of the complexity we bring as humans into the spaces we enter. When I think about the ways we hold ourselves accountable to covenants, I think of Kintsugi. I learned Kintsugi when I lived in Tokyo, Japan for 2 years, and the process often made me think of the ways we deal with our own brokenness. It also makes me think of the ways we mend the mistakes we make. You may remember the video that played before I began, or played just now. In that video, pictures of a broken chalice were shown, and there was outlines in gold in the chalice. I recently got to practice Kintsugi with a chalice that I had ordered online, and it arrived broken in several places. I decided to use Kintsugi as a meditative practice to hold onto during the pandemic and to reflect on the ways we heal our wounds and renew our promises. As you read in the slideshow, Kintsugi is a Japanese practice of repairing broken pottery, in which cracks are filled with golden paint, highlighting the shapes of the cracks with the valuable material. The flowing shape of the flaws add to the beauty of the piece. The technique was developed accidentally when the 15th century shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa broke his favorite tea bowl. He sent it to China to be repaired and was disappointed that it came back stapled together. An author, Andrea Montanavi, tells us, local craftsmen came up with a solution. They filled the cracks with a golden lacquer, making the bowl more unique and valuable. The repair elevated and the fallen bowl back to its place as Shogun's favorite. And it prompted a whole new art form. This method transforms the artifact into something new, making it more rare, beautiful, and storied than the original. Another author, Laura Casely, writes in her article, "Broken Plates Get a New Meaning with Kintsugi, the Art of Finding Beauty in Flaws." She writes that behind Kintsugi is a spiritual philosophy, wabi-sabi, or the embracing of imperfection. A much used, well-worn object, for example, is considered beautiful for its history and for how useful it's been. The crack signify an event in the life of this bowl, the way a scar or a laugh line might signify an event in a person's life. The cracks in a dish are considered something to celebrate, not something to hide. It reminds us that the things we think are flaws, like scars, blemishes, wrinkles, or other signs of our own wear and tear, are actually signs of our unique growth and stories. From Kintsugi, I learned we should all enter into co-creating covenants humbly, knowing we will make mistakes and we will break promises. Think of covenants like a broken chalice, and think of the work of repairing the covenant as gluing the pieces back together using intentional practice, knowing you have to hold still for some time until the pieces stick together and can hold themselves up without support. That's what it's like entering into conversation after making a mistake and breaking a promise, leaning into the difficult conversation, moving past the shame and fear that may be hindering us, and perhaps having someone there to help us enter back into right relationship. We enter into conversation, acknowledge the ways we broke the promise, and hope to mend the relationship until it is able to hold itself together without support. After some time, when the glue dries and we paint the cracks of the once broken chalice in gold, symbolizing the ways we renewed our promise, we see the deepening of relationship. As Jalal ad-Din Rumi, a Muslim philosopher, poet, and saint, once said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Accountability is the willingness to practice repairing harm and mistakes, the willingness to engage in the discomfort of knowing a promise was broken, recommitting to the covenant, and knowing the process of recommitment brings with it healing and light into the wounds that were created for everyone. It's not about being punitive or punishing, but rather centering the repair of a relationship and allowing healing. I leave you with the words of Mia Mingus from her blog post, Dreaming Accountability. She says, "What if accountability wasn't scary? Take a breath and let that sink in for a second. What if accountability wasn't scary? It will never be easy or comfortable, but what if it wasn't scary? What if our own accountability was something we didn't run from, but something we ran towards and desired, appreciated and held as sacred? What if we cherished opportunities to take accountability as precious opportunities to practice liberation, to practice love, to practice the kinds of people, elders to be, and souls we want to be, to practice that which we can only practice in real time. After all, we can only practice courage when we are afraid. We can only practice taking accountability when we have wronged or harmed or hurt. Practice yields the sharpest analysis. May we enter into covenant making by taking a risk with vulnerability and courage, and with a willingness to commit to the alchemy and practice of accountability. May we welcome all our brokenness and our wholeness to the ways we engage with one another. Let us hold each other in the complexity, trust each other as we try to repair and heal. May the covenant that holds us make us resilient as a community. May it be so. Amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.